Hi guys, it's Jess from Honest Fiction, and welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to be sharing my January wrap-up. Alright guys, so January was absolutely amazing in terms of reading. This is definitely the best reading month I've had since starting a booktube channel. Almost every single book was 4 stars or above. I think there was only one I rated 3.5. And we're gonna get into why that was. But most of these books were fantasy romance. There was 2 contemporary romance, and I had a great time. If the rest of the year is gonna be like this, it's gonna be a great 2023. But anyway, if you're unfamiliar with my channel, I post new videos every Thursday and Sunday. If you haven't yet, please like and subscribe. You can also hit the notification bell to be notified whenever I post new bookish content. You can also check out my Instagram and Goodreads, both linked down below. With all that out of the way, let's talk about all of the amazing books I read in January. Alright, and starting off with adult fantasy, first up we have Ninth House by Bardugo. Now this was a reread for me, but honestly I ended up rating it higher this time around. I just loved all the dark gothic vibes of this book. So this is a dark academia story, and we are following Galaxy Stern. Now Galaxy Stern is able to see grays or ghosts, and she really has a lonely life growing up because no one can relate to this. She sees these dead people walking around, and they're even able to kind of interact with her, which is something that has never been heard of before. So after a very traumatic event in her teenage years, she ends up being accepted into this college program known as Leafy, and it's in Yale University. So in Yale University, there are, I believe, 8 different secret, occult societies that all practice different forms of magic. And Galaxy Stern is one of the people that is now in charge of policing these different occult societies and making sure their magic doesn't get out of hand. So she is being taught by Darlington, who's like her mentor, who is teaching her how to essentially accept her position and eventually take over for him. So this is also a mystery. It's kind of jumping between 2 timelines. One timeline is the present, where Galaxy is trying to find Daniel Arlington, and also the history of how Galaxy Stern ended up in Leafy. And I love this. This was just so good. It had to have the perfect amount of action and tension, and like I said, the gothic vibes are everything in this book. It is one of my favorite dark academia stories, which is why I was so excited to start Hellbent by Bardugo, which is the sequel. I've been waiting years, pretty sure 3 years for this sequel, and it did not disappoint. I really can't get into very much of a summary just because it's going to give away spoilers for Ninth House, but I love this. I feel like this amped up the action so much more, and it was such a good sequel. I cannot wait to read the 3rd book. Hopefully it doesn't take another 3 years to release, but I love this. I really enjoyed it. So if you are a fan of Ninth House, I think you will definitely enjoy Hellbent. And this next series is a YA fantasy romance series, and I read the first 3 books as part of a read-along that is being hosted by a bunch of romance booktubers. I will leave all the information down in the description below. But I read the first 3 books of The Vampire Academy, and I do not know how I'm feeling about this series. I do know the first book was definitely my least favorite. So for those of you who have never read The Vampire Academy, I'm going to do my best to explain. So we have the Moroi, which are like powerful elemental vampires, but they're nice vampires. So they only feed on willing humans, and they have their own government, and there's like royal Moroi. And the Moroi are guarded by guardians, and our main character is Rose. She is a guardian, and her best friend is Lissa, and Lissa is a royal Moroi. So Lissa and Rose have been best friends. They're super close, and they have this bond and this connection. And Rose just wants to do whatever is in her power to keep Lissa protected. So at the start of this story, Lissa and Rose are being dragged back to the Vampire Academy, which they escaped from. We don't exactly know why, and that's pretty much where it picks up. So eventually, Rose ends up having a mentor who becomes kind of like a love interest, and it goes from there. So while all this is going on, there's also Strigoi. Now, Strigoi are like the bad vampires that we're all familiar with. They kill humans and feed from them, and they also kill Moroi, and they're pretty much like the big bad of this story so far. So, like I said, first book, not really my thing. Second book, I actually was really getting into the story. I feel like they did a really good job with the characters. And then third book, I was kind of like, it's okay. I will say, I think the audio narration for this book could have been done better. The voices for our main characters come off a little bit whiny. They sound very, very young. And I think if you read this physically, I actually switched and read the last half of the third book on my Kindle, and I definitely think that helped. I just feel like the voices, it wasn't great casting. I did hear that the narration does actually change, though, I think for the 4th, 5th, and 6th book, so I might pick this up via audio again. But yeah, I'm still just not sure how I feel about this series. It feels very YA, but there are also parts that I really enjoyed. So we will be reading the last 3 books and then having a live show in February. So I hope you guys join us. And moving into fantasy romance, so I read this book. This is book 8 of Zodiac Academy, Sorrow and Starlight. And I'm going to tell you in advance, this is going to be a slightly negative review, which is something I do not like doing on my channel, but I just want to give you guys my honest thoughts. So I love this series. This was one of my favorite series when I started my booktube channel. And the last few books, I just haven't been wowed by. And that includes this book. So while there are some beautiful moments in this book, I cried multiple times while reading this. And I love to see where our characters are going. And there were some romances that I really enjoyed. There is so much filler in this book that felt completely unnecessary. This book did not have to be as long as it was. It also did not need the amount of POVs that it had. There is a character that gets a POV in this book that I had to Google who it was. I did not remember them, and they were never a very present character in the books that they are in. So I just feel like this series probably could have ended at 7. I don't know why we're dragging it to 9. And I will say, the last 10% of this book, I thoroughly enjoyed. I thought it was so cool. I love where they're going with the story. But this book didn't need to be this long. And I feel like it could have definitely ended at the original 7 series. So what I'm really hoping is that this 9th book just completely wows me. I will say, if they end up saying that there's going to be more than 9 books, I might not finish this series just because it took me so long to get through this, and I only rated it 3 stars, and that was kind of generous, and that was only for the very end and a couple of emotional moments in the beginning. So overall, I didn't love this. And I just really, really hope the 9th book just completely blows it out of the park and is amazing, because I want to rate this series really high as a whole because I love these characters, I love these romances, but this was just kind of a letdown for me. And next up, I finished the Bonds That Tie series by Bree. So I listened to books 4, 5, and 6. And at the time I'm filming this, they are only available via Scribd. Audible only has up to book 3. I don't know if that'll change by the time this video comes out. But yeah, you can find all of the books, the entire series, on Scribd. So if you're unfamiliar with the Bonds That Tie series, it is a urban fantasy paranormal romance, and it's Why Choose, and I was absolutely addicted. We are following Ollie and her 5 bonded as they try to take down this resistance and these people that are going up against them. So overall, I loved this series. I will say book 6 was probably my least favorite. And without giving away spoilers, the reason why I didn't love book 6 is I feel like they change the big bad towards the end of book 5. And then we spend book 6 trying to give that enemy an arc, but also finish and tie up all the loose ends of the entire series. So honestly, I kind of wish book 6 was 2 books, and I think it would have been done a little bit better. But I still love this series as a whole so much. It is super spicy, and I just loved Ollie and her bonded, specifically Knox, but North is a really close second. But anyway, if you love Why Choose romances, definitely give this series a shot. And next up, I read the first 3 books in the Plated Prisoner series, and I loved it so much. It is 100% worth the hype. So for those of you who are not familiar with my channel, I have DNF'd this series twice. I dislike the first book immensely. Now, having gotten up to book 3 and finished book 3, I love all of the books. You really get to see our main character just completely transform, and I cannot wait to read book 4. So if you're unfamiliar with the Plated Prisoner series, I will also be doing a spoiler-free series review of the Plated Prisoner series once I finish book 4. But this series is following RN, and in the beginning of the story, RN is the gilded pet of Midas. So Midas is this king where everything he touches turns to solid gold. And RN herself is gold, and she has these 24 ribbons that come out of her back, and she just has no autonomy. She only cares about Midas and is completely subservient to Midas. She just wants his praise, and that is all she cares about. So all she does really is drink and just ponder what Midas is doing. And then at the end of the first book, she ends up being taken, and it kind of goes from there. And the third book, it was so good. It was so good. So I actually recently messaged someone, and I was like, the third book of The Plated Prisoner it's not quite, but it's so close to being a Court of Mist and Fury amount of love and angst for me. Like, I loved everything about the third book. So I highly recommend. I did read this during a reading vlog, so I'll have that reading vlog posted. It should be up prior to this video coming out. But yeah, I just absolutely love this series. It is one of my new favorite fantasy romances, and definitely try it out and give it at least to book 3, because I wish I had finished this series sooner. All right, so moving into romance. First up, we have Gothikana by RuNyx. So this is the first book I've ever read by this author, and I had planned on picking this up in October, and I'm kind of kicking myself that I didn't, because this has those paranormal Gothic vibes, and they're done so well. So also, I had no idea this was student teacher, but anyway, this was released via audio, and I think I read it like the first or second day that it came out via audio, and the audio narrator did such a good job. I read this book in one sitting. I couldn't stop reading. So this is following this girl who ends up going to this college. She gets an acceptance letter, and when she gets there, she finds out this college, I believe it's called Vermore, is this like dark Gothic castle. And not only that, people and students are going missing and or being found dead. So there is some sort of curse on this college. And on top of all of this, our main character is kind of questioning things about herself. She is hearing voices in her head, and she has a history. And then she meets her professor, and he is this super attractive, but yet very cold guy, and they end up having instant chemistry, and they can't stay away from each other despite the fact that he's her professor. So it's kind of their relationship, but also trying to uncover the mysteries of this school, and it was so good. Highly recommend picking this up in the fall. It has those perfect Gothic vibes, and it was creepy, but also the romance was like so angsty. I loved it. I loved it so much. Highly, highly recommend. The only like little critique I can give this book is at the end, there are some things that are kind of left unresolved, but that didn't like dampen my enjoyment of the book as a whole at all. I'm totally okay with some things being left in the air, but definitely if you are thinking about picking this book up, do it. Worth all of the hype. I absolutely loved it. And next up, as part of the KU Readathon, I read The Wrong Bride by Catharina Maura. So you're going to notice some of the books I read during the KU Readathon are going to pop up in my February wrap-up, only because it is the Saturday of the KU Readathon when I am recording this. It was the only day I had to film, so that is why some books are going to be missing. But anyway, Cheyenne from That Tall Book Girl was raving about this author, so I really wanted to try out one of her books, and I saw this was recently available via audio, and I really enjoyed it. It was so unlike any other romance I've read. I feel like sister's ex-boyfriend isn't like a typical trope I read. But anyway, we are following Raven and Aries. And Raven is a supermodel, and she's always pined after her sister's fiance. And for some reason, her sister Hannah, who's an actress, ends up breaking it off with her fiance Aries, and then Raven and Aries have to get married because there was a arranged marriage that was done via their families where he had to marry one of them, either Raven or Hannah, in order to get his inheritance. So now that it couldn't be Hannah, it had to be Raven. So now Raven's dreams have all come true, except for the fact that she knows that Aries is in love with Hannah and has dated and been engaged to Hannah for the last 5 years. So it is their romance. I will say, it is so messy, and our main character does have a lot of self-doubts, but I loved it. The spice in this is perfect. I really enjoyed the story. I will say towards the end, there's kind of like a third act problem that I didn't feel was really necessary because it came so close to the end. So it was kind of like problem and then immediate resolution within like a chapter. But overall, I really enjoyed the story, and I cannot wait to read more from this author. All right, and last up, I read Parallel by Elle. This was super popular a while ago. The audio was recently released, and that's how I listened to it. But this is like science fiction romance, and it reminded me a lot of The Time Traveler's Wife without actually feeling like it copied The Time Traveler's Wife at all. Like, it felt very unique. We are following Nick and Quinn has dreamt about Nick her entire life, although she is engaged to someone else. So after an accident, Quinn ends up meeting Nick in person, and he's a doctor, and they right away have this instant connection, but yet they've never met before. So it's really how these two soulmates are able to find each other through time. And there were still a bunch of unanswered questions at the end of this first book. I really have to go and read the next one. Intersect, it's just I have so many books on my TBR, but this was so good, super fast paced. This is another book I read in a single sitting. I was like cleaning my house because I didn't want to stop listening to the audiobook. It was just, it hooks you so quickly. You need to figure out how these two people somehow know each other and have this bond without ever having met. So highly recommend, super unique romance, and I cannot wait to read the next book. All right, guys, those were all the books I read in January. Please let me know down in the comments below what was your favorite read for the first month of 2023. And also, if you've read any of the books I mentioned, please let me know how you feel. And thank you so much for watching. So I said this already, I post new videos every Thursday and Sunday. And if you haven't yet, please like and subscribe. I will see you all next week. Bye.